Hi, everyone. Hi, Keith. How are you?
I'm great. Nice to be here, Diana. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. So, welcome everyone to On the Flip Side. And today we are going to be talking about Airbnb. Airbnb is a really hot topic right now. So many changes going on. So, it'll be exciting to hear what you have to say. And our guest speaker for today that's going to be talking about Airbnb is Keith Makse. And he's also going to be our guest speaker at our networking event that is coming up next month. So you'll definitely get a preview of today, get some high level stuff. And we're going to be so excited because at the networking event, he's going to get to deep dive into all the changes, let us know his experiences. It's going to be so much fun. So thank you so much, Keith, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Awesome. And let's just start let's tell people about your experience with Airbnb, how much time you've been doing, whatever you'd like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out 3 years ago. I had a property that I was willing to experiment with. I had already spent a lot of time researching Airbnb, how to do it. Unlike most others who kind of fall into it, I was very intentional with how I was going to get in there. And even at the time, I remember looking at AirDNA. If anybody's not familiar with AirDNA, it's a website where you can go and find out how your property could actually perform based on historical data. So it's actually pretty good. And I remember reading, it gave me a price point of, I think it was $22,000 or $24,000. And it was like, this is kind of what I could get from a long-term renter, but I don't have to deal with long-term renters. That was my key decision-making right there. So I had renovated this house. I had gotten everything ready. I was actually living in it at the time. We were completing our renovations. We moved out into another property, but I wanted to intentionally design this for short-term rentals. So of course, I way overspent on my furniture costs and blew that budget out of the water, made all kinds of mistakes, which I've learned from. But what was really important at the time was how much can I make? And I knew I had a 6 month window that I'm going to give myself 6 months, see if I can actually make this a thing. So I launched and pretty much at the same time that we had our lockdown. So the lockdown came into place and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sweating bullets. What's going on? Am I going to get anybody? What's going to happen? So the very first guest had booked with me for 3 weeks. And I was very excited by that. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And I, started having a conversation with them. And I found out that they were waiting for a flight. They were wanting to go back home to China and they needed to wait for a flight. Okay, great. And then the next guest stayed with me for a month and I actually was able to extend that out to 5 months. So I was like, oh my gosh, I just got my first 6 months all booked up. It's great. I'm getting by. I don't care right now with this lockdown. Who knows what's going to happen? I was getting by, and I was very happy with that. But as soon as that long-term guest had finished their stay with me, all of a sudden, I was booked. I was booked. I was booked and I was hooked is probably the easiest way I could say it. I just loved the interaction with the guests. I loved making sure that I was giving a good product to every guest who was coming in. And really at that point, I was like, okay, how can I start scaling this? And I was already doing some other work in real estate, but that's when I realized this is where my true passion was, like as an investor, is getting these properties, turning them around, and then getting some great guests in there. And so that started off in early of like basically 3 years ago today, literally today, on the 27th. I'm just realizing that.
Oh, wow. We would be
Yeah,
aiming for this video,
perfect
right?
anniversary. Yeah. But yeah, I started off. I took some training. We started focusing on management rather than arbitrage. So the difference between those two, just go over it.
And actually, sorry,
Management,
before you get to
yeah,
actually do that,
yeah.
I wanted to make a point that I feel like that, which I thought was really funny, because I feel like this is like a rite of passage for all types of real estate investing, is like the overspending and the over like making it feel like our own, or wanting to like put like the best of everything. And so I just wanted to make that point because I found it funny, because I feel like that's just like a rite of passage, you know. It's like if you're a first time real estate investor, I feel like it's I've never heard someone that doesn't do that, you know. It's just like for some reason it's just like we want to like, it's like we want to make it our own home kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I refer to Airbnb as, like, when people ask me what I do, I say I play house professionally, right? So let's say I'm gonna throw this number out just to give you an idea of what overspending to me was. And between furniture, holding costs on the property, I did drag my heels, and I was working a full-time job, but I feel drag my heels, and I was always a little hesitant to start, and I was always waiting for the right time. And yeah, whatever, we do that as well as investors, I find.
Yeah.
So I probably was in for about 35K. And that number is going to become very very interesting when you hear about my next project that I just did. So yeah, once when I started off, we were looking at doing management contracts. I had a business partner. We weren't really looking to take on, we were trying to deal with less risk and mitigate some of that. So we were willing to work for landlords who had great properties where they were okay with us. They wanted to do the Airbnb, but Airbnb short-term rentals are such an extreme, I shouldn't say extreme, but it is a very active business strategy. A lot of people think, oh yeah, I can do this. This is great. It's going to be passive and I'm going to make so much more cash flow. It is not passive whatsoever. You can put in systems in place and hire team members, but now you're actively managing them rather than the business or the business itself, but you're not in the operation side.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because I think, and this is again generalizing in all of real estate, I don't know why this view of, you know, oh, just get things set up, or even same thing like flips, spurs, whatever, any strategies, for some reason it's like, oh, you do it enough and then soon it can be autonomous and working on its own. And it's really not like that. When you become like a full-time investor, it is a job, and it is like, exactly, Airbnb, same thing. That was one of the things why, same thing, like in my opinion, I'd prefer to be like, let me give it to you because you love it, you like doing it. Because it's like, for me, I love doing different other things, and it's just like, I just want the income. Because for me, for example, I love is like going through the process of like negotiating the property and like figuring out like how to make like a good deal work for everyone. Like that side of stuff like really excites me. It's a lot of fun. And so like that, like, so I think that's both. But so that would be like one question, but I think to talk about after is like the different types, like what areas you want to be in Airbnb, or when to like hand it off, I think is a good one. But before that, I think also the explanation of like, what is Airbnb, what is Airbnb arbitrage, and then what is the management, like what are the differences between these three, I think is a great one to start with.
Yeah, so management is really where I get to work with you. You want to have the Airbnb, but you don't want to do the active work of it. So I come in with all my systems, my tools, my team, and we do it for you. And then we're just taking a commission off of the revenue that we're generating for you. So we get to live and die by the same sword. That way, the better we do, the better we perform, the better we'll earn. And the same for you. And then if we get, for whatever reason, and there are sometimes this is happening with people right now, if we create nothing, no bookings, no reservations, you earn nothing, we earn nothing. And yet there's still expenses that will go on throughout all of this. Arbitrage, though, is where you now remove yourself as the landlord one step, where now I become the tenant, you know, subject to all the regular tenancy laws. But the difference is, compared to, say, a long-term renter, I have multiple sources of income coming in. So I'm more likely to be able to pay the rent than Joe, who, you know, Joe Schmo goes out, gets a job, and he starts paying rent. Joe loses his job, he stops paying rent. Or maybe he doesn't stop, loses but he still stops paying rent, whatever it is. So like, this is where I'm coming in with a good intention, because I want to be the best last tenant that landlord will ever have, because I'm going to be there doing so much more than a regular tenant will. And I wind up saving landlords thousands of dollars, literally thousands of dollars, just by having me as the tenant. So
because you also want to maintain the place very nicely, so that in itself, it's like you're not like I would even say that the thought process is just so different, right? Because having someone with Airbnb, it's almost like commercial real estate. You're having a professional business person come into your unit.
Yep.
Compared to like a tenant that's just going to live there. Like, your views on things are much more different than a regular tenant would come in.
Yeah, and the way I look at it as well is like, I also am a real estate investor. I want to take care of that property as much as I want to take care of my own. But the difference is, I may not be in it for the equity on the property. I'm in it for the 5-star reviews, and that will make and break businesses, no problem. The more of those 5-star reviews I can get in, so that means I have to have always a good looking place, but a well maintained place. So there's no deferred maintenance, right? You're not going to have like, oh, the busted toilet where it's leaking water all the time and it's on an auto flush, right? I'm going to take care of that. As soon as I hear about it, my cleaners will hear about it. I get the cleaners in, so I have eyes and ears on a regular basis. So that's one of the hugest, like, biggest differences from having a long-term tenant. And then on top of it, I mean, we also have our photos. The photos that we have on day one, that's how we should be 5 years down the road. Every so often, like, some of the bedding will get changed, or something gets broken, something gets stained. We'll cycle that out, put something in to replace it, hopefully the same thing. But it should always be looking in that staged property look, which, I mean, how much would you pay for staging on a home right now?
Staging on a home, I mean, it depends on the size, but I guess it's usually around 5,000. I mean, if it's bigger, I mean, let's say average is 5,000 to 15,000, I would say.
Yeah. So all of a sudden we've come in with our furniture. It's now staged when we're done. Like, it looks great. And that's one of those things where if you decide to sell the home, I'll work with you on that. And then all of a sudden you've saved yourself on the staging. It's already staged. So there's a lot of different ways that we wind up helping out landlords over time on that arbitrage side. Why landlords do want to work with us, because sometimes people are all, everybody wants that cash flow, right? Whether it's passive or it's active, you want that cash flow. But there are certain things where you're willing to bend on, knowing for that peace of mind that you're going to be saving money down the road. So
yeah, and definitely, that's very true. That's a very good point that you make, because, and I guess that's where even the division between Airbnb arbitrage and then just management, that's, I guess, also a line where, because from the sounds of it, in management, you're not the tenant, you're supporting the landlord to get the Airbnb up and running and working, getting it done, compared to with Airbnb arbitrage. It sounds like you were saying that you do become the tenant, but then now you're paying and taking responsibility for the whole process. Whereas I'm assuming, I guess, in management, they probably pay, let's say, for all the staging, I guess, of it.
Well, yeah, usually in management, the owner will be paying for the furniture, and we have different ways we can assist. We can actually even furnish the whole place for them. Like, they just give us a credit card and we'll take care of the design and everything.
You'll set it up to make it look nice, because obviously you're the expert, but they'll be paying for it and probably give you at least a budget, just so they don't feel like, don't go overboard.
Exactly. Yeah, but then, like, my thought is that I've been very fortunate. Most of my real estate, like the landlords, the investors who have these properties, they really do care about the property, and they also care about providing not just a good product, but a good service to the guests who are coming in. But there could be, and this is part of the vetting I have to do when I'm going to be doing a management contract. I really do them for friends and maybe a few other people. But the whole point of that is that I could get somebody, I don't want to say slumlord, but you can get somebody who may not care as much about the property. It's like,
Mhm.
well, I usually get the tenant to shovel the snow. Well, you can't ask the Airbnb guest to shovel the snow. You need to take care of it because it's a major liability issue.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm gonna just leave it. Can't do that. You have to take care of it. So it's those little things that can actually lead into major problems and friction in the relationship that I'm always looking out for. I want to make sure that they're as on board with providing that 5-star service as I am, because
Mhm.
I need that property to be working well. If I have somebody who doesn't care as much on the management side, then that could actually lead to, like, it's they're not in sync with the hospitality industry of what short-term rentals are. And that's where a
Mhm.
lot of people get this wrong is, in my opinion, a lot of people got into Airbnb, Verbo, booking.com, whatever platforms that they're on, because they thought it was going to be a easy, passive real estate strategy. But it's not real estate at all. It's hospitality. The
Mhm.
guest communication is going to be the most important factor. You have all kinds of issues that come up with guests, starting from just them starting to ask questions about the property and how do you respond to them. They could have issues with their billing, and you know, some people. I've actually seen some people throw up their hands and say, "I can't figure this out. Just don't come." Right, whatever, or they'll do e-transfers, and that's just a terrible way of doing things,
Mhm.
going off platform sometimes. There's right ways to do it and wrong ways to do it, and I see a lot of wrong that
Mhm.
goes on there. But it's also about making sure at the end of the day you're providing that experience for the guest, so that the next one will be able to come back. You also have to have that place cleaned every single time. Like, that is, the cleaners are the backbone of this industry, of this entire process. And if you don't treat
Mhm.
them well, that creates so many problems for you down the road. And you need to get a good quality cleaner with good systems in place. Otherwise, like I had one place where the cleaner that I had at the time, so this is one of the mistakes that I've learned. They had a vacuum. Great, come on in. And they did a job, and then guests complained that there were pet hairs all over this carpet. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'll send the cleaner back. The cleaner goes back, does the job, charges me again, and it's like, why are you charging me again? Because you didn't clean this. He's like, no, we vacuumed it. Okay, well, like, it's pet hairs. Did you use the same vacuum? Yeah, we did. Why aren't you? Do you have a pet vacuum, like a pet quality vacuum? No, we don't have that. Those cost too much. Wait a second. I thought that, and I had missed out at the very beginning. This is one of those things that you really need to make sure that your cleaners actually have, or you supply them with, um, at the property. And because all of a sudden, the second guest had complained about pet hairs after the cleaner had already been there the second
Mhm.
time. So cleaners are really important, and treating them well is really important as well. There's a lot of just communication that goes on the cleaner side,
Mhm.
as well as with the guests. So it's always making sure that everybody is happy.
100%. And so I guess, so then I guess Airbnb, the landlord fully takes it on their own. Everything has to do it on their own. And then the next one I would feel like would be management, where you get someone, they just, I guess you take like a percentage, I guess, of
Yeah.
whatever the costs are, and then, or the profits are. And from there, you're still, I guess, still besides the percentage, you're still doing like you're still doing everything that you would do in arbitrage, just you're not being the tenant in that case, right? Is that how you differentiate? And then the Airbnb arbitrage is that you are the tenant to the land, like the landlord's tenant, and then you fully take care of everything, which I guess, and some extra costs, like you would be also taking care of the cost of like furnishing the place.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll furnish the place. And then, like, honestly, if there's like a $200 fix, like, let's say somebody broke a toilet or the toilet wouldn't flush properly, whatever, we'll take care of that. And we don't usually charge that to the landlord. We'll just
Mhm.
say, hey, by the way, this happened. we took care of it. It's all good. And people are usually pretty happy with that. As opposed to management, where all of those costs go on to the landlord, right? Every single one, from the furniture to everything else. And then it's about how much revenue we're able to generate for them.
And that's a good point, actually, between the management and arbitrage, because in arbitrage, actually both management, but like you said, with arbitrage, because you're handling everything on your own, that you want quick turnarounds to get everything done. And if you're depending on the landlord to get them to get it fixed, and if they take like a few days or something, that affects your bottom line, where it's like arbitrage, you're just like go, go, go. You're getting things done quickly because you want to make sure it's ready for the next, I would say, not tenant, but
guest.
Whatever you call them.
Yeah. So I always say guest, and it's a specific phrase in my books where I don't have tenants. They are not coming in. They're not staying. They could stay for more than 30 days, but they are not staying with the intention of living there. They're only staying for a short period of time, whether it's for work or personal reasons, doesn't matter. They actually are moving on to somewhere else. So they're just a guest in someone else's home for that period of time.
And so any other differences that you would like to differentiate between, or things that you would do between management and arbitrage?
Well, the work is basically the same in throughout. It's really the expectations of the owners on their end. So with arbitrage, I take on all the risk. I put in the cost of the furniture. I pay the rent on a monthly basis, no matter how much I'm making. The goal is to make more, obviously, than what I'm paying rent on. That's how I make my profits. But at the same time, obviously the goal is to build that business and to have the scalability behind all of those units. If I'm doing management, then I have a lot less risk, and I have a decent reward without that investment going into the property. But I still have my own expenses, right? There's still going to be my own team, my own efforts that are going into it. But usually all of those all other expenses are actually covered under the management system, where they're paying for all the cleaners, they're paying for the furniture, they're paying for any fixes that need to get claimed or not claimed, like anything that needs to get repaired. And then what else? Like all the regular day-to-day maintenance on the property that would go on, they're covering all that. So I usually work hand in hand. I can handle a lot of that for them on their behalf. Where I find the biggest difference is between the two models is that if a landlord wants stability, financial stability, they go with me with arbitrage. Management, I'm very selective about who I choose. As I was saying, it has to be the right person. But there's a volatility in terms of the revenue. February in Canada is a very slow time of year. You may make $0, right? And people don't want to hear that. They want to hear they're going to make their rent every single month because they got a mortgage to pay. But the way I look at this is that I'm in this for like 3 to 5 years down the road. I still want to be at that property. And then over that time, am I going to build enough revenue on my end that I'm actually paying for all those expenses and making a profit?
100%. And I think that's also a great point to make, is that as you being the tenant, you're there for the long haul. And also just with that, also if management is the same, but like you said, it's the owner themselves that is really managing their money to make sure they're spreading it out. And like that, like you will have a month with no income, and it's kind of their responsibility to make sure they save in those high times, some of it for the low times. Whereas in the arbitrage, you basically manage everything completely. Take care of it, all of it. You are the tenant, and it's very, very, sounds like it's very hands off. So I guess that's also the trade, it sounds like, right? Like, let's say for me, I would probably go for the arbitrage, like take my home.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't care that you make tons of profits. To be honest, for me personally, I would care more about the stability. Like, all I care about is that the property's paying for itself, or I'm making my profits. I don't need to be like going huge profits, because it makes sense, right? You're a much more active person in it. You're doing all the work, the day-to-day work. For me, I'd be like, take the profits because you deserve it,
Yeah.
I was like, I just wanted to make me my cash flow, and that's it.
Yeah. And I think that's the real big difference right there is most landlords want that stability, and that's what I can provide them with. And it's like, think of it, when you have a turnover, you're probably shut down for at least a month, right? Because you have somebody who gave you notice. Let's say everything goes well and you have somebody that gave you 60-day notice. You're actually already applying or putting out an ad for your property. You're going to be collecting applications. Meanwhile, while you're vetting new potential tenants, you're also going to be you're going to repaint the place. You're going to fix up anything that's in there. You're trying to like improve it to a level which is going to be like bringing the higher quality tenants to your place, who are willing to pay a little bit more in order to live there. I get to stay. On the other hand, I'm going to be there for a while. You're not going to have that tenant turnover. You never have to worry about that, because I'm turning over guest after guest after guest. And so like you get to trade off and save a little bit, because you're not losing that 1 or 2 months. Let's say if you had a lot of deferred maintenance, it could be 2 months of dealing with all that stuff. That's another way that we actually save landlords a lot of money.
Yeah, and then from the sounds of it, on the management side, I can see why you say it's like a select few of people, because like you were saying before, where if you guys aren't aligned to make sure the unit looks good, and let's say, like, yes, you don't want to go overboard with the spending, but at the same time making sure you spend the right amount to make sure that unit does look amazing, so you can find those great guests. I think that, is there anything else, any other reasons why? Because I feel like that sounded to me, at least the main one, it's like the alignment and the values kind of need to be the same for you to want to work with someone in the management sense. Are there anything else that you would say in the management sense as why you're so selective with the people you will work with?
Well, it's like you said, it's about that alignment of values, but it's also the making sure that the end goal is the same on both of our ends. If somebody is just focused on equity, building equity in their home, paying off their mortgage, having some cash flow, that's great. That doesn't necessarily equate to getting those 5-star reviews, having that best experience, having I need to deal with stuff right away. It could be an issue from security systems to mechanical systems to anything else in that property. It could even just be, hey, like, we wanted to come in and we brought our baby with us. Do you have a crib or a high chair that we can use? And some people are like, I'm not going to pay $100 for that. Meanwhile, like, I actually have a crib and a high chair and a few other things, both for small kids and small humans and small animals. But the idea is that these are an investment into the business of how to attract more guests, not into I never think of it as an expense. I think of these as investments. So that's also, it's part of that mindset of what are you actually investing into, and who is your ideal client for your property. Like, if you're in a 1-2 bedroom unit apartment, that might be a very different guest than you're trying to get in a 5-bedroom house. And 100%. So you have to take a look at what is the end goal of the landlord, the investor, the property, and do all of these things align, as well as the values. So these are all really important, and to make sure that people are aware that, over time, what is the emotional fortitude of these the management host, let's call them, if they don't have the fortitude to deal with stains, messes, parties, anything else, if they freak out over anything that a guest does that they wouldn't do, I don't want to work with them, because there are a lot of things that the guests do. I have had to make so many air cover claims. So Airbnb has this sort of, I don't want to call it insurance, but they have their own system of being able to submit claims against things that are broken, stained, stolen, whatever it is, as long as you have the proof behind all of that. And if it does require some emotional strength to just to get through that and realize, like, look, this is just part of the business, this is what we have to deal with. But some people don't look at it that way. They get offended. They're like, oh, they ruined my favorite throw blanket. Well, if it was your favorite, why was it in that house? Like, you should have had it at home. Like, you got to be ready for everything. Not that it will, but everything will eventually break or wear down over time, and it's going to be somebody else who's going to do it. I had a place where, honestly, every bed was covered in blood and food, and the carpet was covered in food, and the sofa was covered in food as well. And my cleaner walked in, took all these photos, sent it to me, and I'm like, yep, that's really gross. So can you clean it?
Yeah.
And she was all emotionally like, oh my God, this is terrible. But you know, it's part of the job. Can you clean it? If not, we're going to throw stuff away.
It's like, I'm going to pay you extra at least, because it's obviously going to take a lot more energy.
Yeah, exactly. And so that went into the claim that we put against the guest, and said, like, we required all this extra work, obviously, you know. So there are
another point that you make that actually I want to emphasize, because it's the same thing as just real estate investors buying in properties. To be honest, it's also just doing what you do. You become like a mediator, or to make sure that, like that like if you're doing the management side, that the landlord's okay, or like your workers are okay, and kind of like calming them down, that it's, like everything's going to be okay, So I feel like that's like a big part of what you do too. Is like, it's almost like mitigating and trying to like maintain everything at the status quo, and not let people get bent out of shape for certain things. It's just like, let's move on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go forward.
And to be honest, that's one of the reasons why I'm so selective about management, because I'm already mitigating the guest and the cleaner, even my own internal team. Sometimes I don't need another sort of babysitting experience. I don't need to babysit that owner who freaks out over the fact that their TV is broken. You should be thrilled your TV is broken. You can buy a new one for the same price, right? And get a better one. Maybe it's 5 inches bigger for the same price. You never know. So
it's really funny. That's funny you say that. We like that. We like when things break, because we'll take stuff from our house, put it in theirs, and then we buy ourselves something new.
Oh, that's
like,
perfect.
We got this amazing, beautiful fridge. It was like so nice. And then we're just like, man, that one's so much nicer. We took our fridge, put it in the other house, and we put their fridge. This one, we did it specifically a swap, but it's always, I actually like when things break at other places, because it's just like, we use stuff from our house, we'll put it over there, and then we upgrade our stuff.
Yeah,
so that's how we slowly upgrade our things in our house. So you guys should be happy when things break.
Exactly, right? Because like, for instance, I know this one guy, he had these older TVs that had like a fire stick, and he's like, he used to mount all of his TVs to the wall, but he's like, you know what, guys, we're going to take these TVs and we're just going to lay them out, because if somebody steals them, we'll get a full refund, like a full payment, and we'll get a new one, a brand new TV. These were like 5 years old or something, and he just wanted to upgrade them. So he's like, yeah, let people steal them. It's all good.
That's so funny. And so with, what was the other thing I wanted to say about that you were talking about? And I guess one of the reasons why people may lean towards management, especially I feel like in this environment, is probably because the rents don't really cover the expenses, and they're probably finding an in-between. They want to do Airbnb because it'll give them enough, like give them more cash to be able to pay their expenses off, but at the same time, like that, they may not want to do Airbnb arbitrage, because then it's going back to the tenant just being a tenant, which for them, they may not be covering enough of their expenses that they need because of just the fluctuations we've had in this market. So I guess that's probably one of the reasons why someone may move towards them just getting someone to manage the property so they can at least take advantage of those the extra profits they make. Was that,
Yeah.
is that how you see it usually happening? Or what other
Um,
reasons do you see when
I
people wanted
yeah,
to get into the management side?
I think one of the biggest reasons that people get into management is, and I'll call it out, is landlord tenant board in Ontario.
Mhm.
Now, I have properties outside of Ontario. I have some out in Calgary. I just picked up a couple of management contracts out there. So I do both out there, but I also have now some down in Phoenix, Arizona, that are just arbitrage. But the reason why in Ontario that there's so many investors who get behind the management is that because they are managing, or I manage the property for them, and they don't have a tenant, therefore they can still hold on to the property, but they don't have an issue with even me being a tenant, where if I stop paying rent, what are you going to do, right?
Like as in if you do Airbnb arbitrage,
Yeah,
if
if I'm doing
person were
arbitrage and
to, yeah.
like there is some, I've actually been asked, like, what if you don't pay me? Well, you're still dealing with this if I don't pay you. The difference is I got 5 people coming in this month who are actually paying me. If I'm not paying you, that's going to be drastically negative on my reputation, right? And I'm going to do anything I can to protect my reputation. I want to pay rent in advance if I can,
Yeah.
like a
And
couple
I
of
think
days
the
before.
other big difference is also like you're not living there anyways.
Hmm.
So it's not as if you would do like the squatting thing. Like this is a business for you. So
Yeah.
you're like, if it's not working, you're probably like, okay, we got to get out, like move on to the next one. Like if something happens, laws change,
Yep.
or something happens where it's just like you can't seem to do Airbnb in that unit anymore. I feel like in a business sense, you're just like, okay, in and out. Let's get like we gotta go. Let's clear out the place for you so you can tenant it out. Because what is the like? What would be the benefit of you even like to say squatting? Like not you don't even live there anyway, so it's not really you can squat there. You
Yeah.
know, like you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah, exactly. And
so
I
that's
and
kind of I would say a big benefit too is that like it's the mindset is completely different. Like an Airbnb arbitrage mindset person like yours compared to a tenant, like a traditional tenant and not you as being the tenant, is just a completely different mindset, right? You're coming in a business sense to get the work done, to make money for you and the tenant and the landlord. And so you're not really going to be squatting there and waiting to get evicted. You know, like in your perspective, that wouldn't even make any sense anyways to do that because you don't live there.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I like I was saying before, I see myself as a fellow real estate investor. I'm not going to do that to somebody else, right? That's an entire relationship. And I think the relationships are a lot more important than the a few dollars that you're going to get in between. I mean, this is a relationship based industry, both
Mhm.
hospitality and real estate, and it's
100%.
combining those two together. So those relationships to me are way more valuable than me screwing somebody over for a few $1,000s. I'd
Hmm.
never do that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I do see like where uh like with management, a lot of people just have issues with the fact that for instance, I have a friend who it took her 16 months, again partially due to the pandemic and lockdowns and all this other crap that was going on, that it took 16 months of somebody not paying rent before she could evict that person, and that person caused almost as much damage as the rent she didn't pay.
Mm.
So all of a sudden you're out tens of thousands of dollars. Well, this is why they want to go with management. They want to go to Airbnb because they don't trust people now. They don't
Mhm.
trust the system that's in place. It's not even they don't trust people, because honestly, I honestly think 99% of the people out there are wonderful and they're good. And it's just that 1%, the bad apples, make the problems for everybody else. But because the system is so broken, even if you like are just about on the edge, it's like a black hole. You're sucked in and there's almost no way out for the longest time. So I feel terribly for any real estate investor who has to go through that. I've been very lucky with the properties that I have that I've been able to get out. And I did start out in 2011 with a professional tenant, and that was a terrible experience. I won't go into details, but it was a terrible experience, and I never want to repeat that again. And that's why when I was coming to this property, I was like, you know what? I've lucked out over here. This one, I want to try this method because it's totally different. I
Mm-hmm.
want to get behind it, and it's that fear that actually kind of made me get into Airbnb in the first place, because I also like to be in a little bit more control than what the typical landlord situation is. Again, 99% of the people are great. You're never going to have a problem, but are the, 1% out of how many millions of renters do we have in Canada means that there's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of bad actors out there.
100%, completely agree. And now that you were talking about the different provinces and now out in the US, just curious, I mean, in a general sense, because I don't know how if it's very different, but curious on, is there differences between provinces and, let's say, countries that you've noticed so far on when we're dealing with Airbnb arbitrage and management?
Absolutely. And we can even go city by city for the differences that are in between, right? Because here in Ontario, we have so many cities. So first of all, Canada, especially if you saw the news last week discussing about how we had 1 million new people in the country. That's a massive
Yes.
number.
Yeah,
This is from the
that was
government
shocking.
yeah, it is shocking, especially when they said they were only going to take in like 400 to 500,000, and they doubled that number. And there's nowhere for these people to live. We're already in a housing crisis, right? And so then what? So right now, I'm getting a lot of people who come to me, stay at a short-term rental because they're coming to a city trying to find a place to rent. And it's not that I'm taking such a great amount of properties off the market. It's the fact that there's just not enough properties out there to service everybody. And some people, well, like when I first moved to Kitchener, where I live, when I first moved here, my wife and I are like, okay, let's rent because that's what we're going to have to do. We didn't even think of the concept of renting short term for just a few months so we could then buy a house. We were
Mm-hmm.
stuck in a lease for a year, and I didn't know enough then that I do now that I could have broken that lease no problem. They would have been able to rent it out for hire. They would have been happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt stuck in that lease, and we didn't do anything for a long time before we bought
So
our
what
first
kind of,
property here.
yeah, 100%. So what kind of changes are you like, do you see then with between city to city or like that province
Yeah,
or
I
state?
see a lot of places, especially in major metropolitan centers, where what they're doing is they're putting restrictions on short-term rentals where it has to be an owner-occupied dwelling. It can only be listed as a short-term rental for only 180 days a year. It has to follow a licensing, like you have to apply for a license, or there could be stipulations on getting an inspection done. So there's a lot that goes around. Like the city of Calgary is fantastic. They just want to confirm that they can follow you, and you apply for a license. The license is free. You just go online, fill out everything that you need to do, pops out the number for you, or your identification number, license number, and then you post it on the walls, right? So that they know that you're a properly licensed place. There's no other restrictions or anything else. But then you go to a city like Toronto, and all of a sudden it has to be owner occupied. It has to be 180 days maximum. Um, where if so that means that you have to do it as a short-term rental, and then you're taking whatever long-term, like mid-term 1 month plus stays as you can. So you're not a long-term, you're not a short-term, you're kind of in the middle. But there are some risks involved with, as soon as you go over 30 days, are you actually a long-term or not? So like in California, for instance, they have a 30-day squatter right. So after 30 days, if you've been staying at a place, you can claim squatting rights in a property. And I remember there was a video last year of this woman who had a guest who stayed with her for 30 days. All of a sudden she stopped paying, claims that she lives there, and that's it. She's now living there rent free.
Oh, wow.
So you
I
have
didn't
to
even
make
know that's so short, 30 days. That's
Yep.
very short.
Yep.
Maybe like find someone who's on vacation more than 30 days and be like, my house.
And so this is why, like, it's really important with like myself and my team, where we go through and like we're asking guests a lot of questions before we even say yes to the booking. Now, some, like, we do always have instant book on for the good guests, the people who have already experienced, like, have the experience of being a guest and they are good, 5-star reviews as a guest. It's great. Never had a problem with them. But with a brand new person, in like Airbnb is still a, even though it's 10 years old, it's still a new company. Like 30 to, I forget what the number is, but I think it used to be 40%. It may be less now. Of their reservations are done by new guests. So it's still a growing market in a massive way. So there's still a lot of opportunity there. The problem is that you don't know what you're getting. And so you want to make sure you're not getting the party people, you're not getting people who are going to trash the place. You want to get people who have that experience. But if they don't, then they go through our vetting process where we start asking them question after question to make sure that they're the right person, the right fit for the property.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. So what would you say is your, let's say in Ontario, actually. So what's your favorite city right now in Ontario, like your top 3 to do Airbnb arbitrage and or management?
Right now, number one is still Kitchener-Waterloo. There's currently no restrictions. There's no licensing requirements. It's kind of open. It's kind of Wild West. However, to me, that's still a yellow flag, because there isn't anything that's actually on paper, means that the city government could actually turn around and, or the regional government here could turn around and say, no, we actually want to start regulating this. And then there could be problems where all of a sudden they could start putting in restrictions that could kill my business overnight. So then, if that was the case, I could either approach the landlords and say, hey, how do you feel if you took this over? And, or, is there another way that we could actually work? And I always try to work within, I know a lot of people want to get around and skate the rules as much as possible, but I believe in working within, because I want to have as little friction as possible to be created. I'm trying to
I mean, you
run.
deal with enough stress doing the Airbnb itself. Why add on more?
Exactly. So, like, if I had to, I'll just pack up all my stuff and go somewhere else, or I'll just sell it off. I mean, we're seeing this happen in Hamilton, Ontario, London, Ontario, where the cities have come in, and in my opinion, I could totally be wrong, and I can admit to that. That's why it's an opinion, is that the governments are trying to use housing crisis as a way of garnering votes. Because when you can say, hey, we're going to stop short-term rentals and we're going to put regulations and restrictions and pull all this down, then all of a sudden all these people who are like trying to find a place to live, say in London, who go, okay, our vacancy rate was like 1%, and they've destroyed so many different short-term rentals. Awesome. Our vacancy rate is now 1.2%. Is that really like making a difference? No. Plus, there's so many other places, like when Windsor put in their restrictions, I've heard of people where all of a sudden, like, there were so many people who were there for work, working on the new bridge that was going to Detroit and doing there was some other work going on. Now, all of these people didn't have a place to go. They were forced into a long-term lease that they didn't want. They didn't know how long they were going to be there. Their work might have only been for a month or two, and they don't want to live in a hotel. Plus, there's not enough hotels for all of these workers to live in. So what do you do? Right? So to me, this is an alternative form of housing which is very much required as much as a long-term tenancy at any place, because people move. We are humans. We are not stuck to one city for 50 years, and we never leave that city. We're going to go out, we're going to see friends, we're going to see family, we're traveling for work. There's so many different areas that people are actually using these short-term rental properties for, because they need to. All of a sudden you take those out of the market, and it screws a lot of people over in terms of what the capacity is, because now, and to be honest, so you have the governments that are trying to get these votes. And I also think that it's the hotel industry, which is pushing the government, selling them on the housing crisis, because their market is hurting, because they only provide their hotel accommodations. And hotel accommodations, there's a time and a place for it, depending on what people want. But a lot more people are outside of that. I want 4 walls, a bathroom, a bed, and a coffee maker.
Yeah, or even a full kitchen. Like lots of people like to have a full kitchen so they
Yeah,
decide what they're cooking and not have to eat out all the time too.
exactly. And that's what I'm referring to, because like really a hotel room in most cases is nothing other than a studio apartment with a coffee maker. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But now you can have a full kitchen. Sure, hotels actually have gyms, but they also have their restaurant attached to it. Right. If you're going to eat out, I'm tired, I'm just going to go downstairs and eat there. But now you can have people who save some more money because, as we know, food is, inflation rates are just so high that they want to save some money on food. Well, they're going to cook for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're traveling with a larger group, you have a fully stocked kitchen. You can actually cook for like 6-8 people and save yourself a ton of money rather than paying like $50 a head when you go out for dinner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It depends, like you said, it depends on who, who the person is. They decide what they want. So it's nice to have that option that, do I want to go into a hotel, have the hotel experience, or do I want to go into an Airbnb? Because that's in its own, it's a different experience in its own. So I think that's also, yeah, a great point. And so any last, for the last question, because you talked about Waterloo,
Yeah.
Kitchener.
Yeah.
Is there one that is regulated, or another city that you do like that you're not worried about that changes may happen because they are done, or the regulations are in place?
So I'll have to tell you about one of the places where I actually have a unit right now. I have one out in Wallaceburg. So it's between like Windsor and Sarnia. And this is a management contract that I have with a friend of mine. And we were just taken out. So the reason why I like it for the regulation restrictions is that A, there are none. B, I don't think that there ever will be, because it is such a small town. They don't have the capacity to manage it or deal with that. And there's so few. Like everybody has these private rooms in that town, and this is the only house that's actually in there.
Mm-hmm.
Normally I wouldn't even try to arbitrage a property like that, but it is done so well because there's such little competition. So we're pretty happy with how it's turned out. But at the same time, yeah, it's like one of those things when a town is so small, they're not going to have regulations. But the Ontario government could always come in and make a massive sweeping change, and because they are they've downloaded all the decision making processes onto the municipalities. But most municipalities, um, honestly, the regulations across Ontario are getting harder and harder. That's why one of the major reasons why we're moving down to the U.S. So we're targeting markets where we can actually work without issues or any inhibitions by government.
Mm-hmm. So then it sounds like in Ontario, it's going a lot more towards the management side, and the Airbnb arbitrage side is getting smaller and smaller than it looks like.
Yeah, it is. And like I take a look in pretty much every city in Ontario that has Airbnbs, where the competition has now gone just doubled over the past 3 years in terms of the
Mm-hmm.
actual supply. So we have this oversupply right now in Ontario, because everybody realized like they want to get out of the landlord tenant board issues. They want to create more cash flow because of the like the skyrocketing housing prices. They think that short-term rentals are going to save them, so they're all getting in behind this. But a lot of them are failing. You can take a look at their calendars, and they're bleak. There's nothing booked out for the next few months. There's nothing in there, and so
Mm-hmm.
not that it means that they're not getting anything, but it is a very scary business if you just see that calendar after calendar, nothing's coming in, no money, no revenue is coming in. How are you going to pay for that? So
Mm-hmm.
I've lost even on the management side, I've lost at least 3 properties now because of the whole economy in the market, where
Too many on the market.
yeah, so many people had a variable interest rate on their mortgage, and then all of a sudden their mortgage went from like 2,800 to 5,200, whatever, like just huge differences. And they were like, yeah, I can't operate this way anymore. I'm gonna have to sell.
Oh, so they sold it.
Yeah.
So you've been losing them just because they've been selling the properties.
In a lot of cases, yeah.
Yeah, it is like times are definitely changing, and it's interesting, I guess. Yeah, everything's going more to the Airbnb management side, I guess. At least, I mean, here in Ontario, at least, until hopefully something changes. Maybe they go back or allow it, or
possibly.
Or you never know, maybe a loophole will happen, and then there's a possibility to do arbitrage in some way.
Yeah. So one last thing I wanted to say. So I mentioned that when I did my first property, I spent $35K.
Yes.
Right. So I just walked out of my units in Phoenix, Arizona, where we're actually setting them up for about $3,500 each. So it's a huge difference from going from that expense down to like a tenth. Now it's a very different property, obviously, but I just thought, I've learned a lot over the past 3 years in terms of how to really dial back the expenses, where to spend money, where not to spend money. And it really has been coming about to like in a huge way that it'll turn around to where I can actually pay off the furniture much quicker. And then I'm actually seeing profits even in year 1, I'll be seeing straight up profits, which is great.
But it also sounds like just that I guess things in the US, buying things in the US is also very cheap then too.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, yes, being selective, but I mean, I feel like you said 3,100, right? What was it what you said?
35.
Yeah, 3,500. I just feel like what could I buy? With that much, like, to properly furnish, like I feel like just that amount of money is needed just to get the kitchen furnished,
Yeah, so we hired a design team, Pink Wall Designs. They're fantastic to work with. We've been able to do everything remotely with them. Like they're here in Ontario, but they're doing everything for us down there. And we have an installation team that's going to like install all of our furniture for us. And now, like I said, we were talking, like 2 different properties. One was a 4-bedroom house, and the other one is a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. But you're still seeing a lot of the same expenses. Like I still have a sofa, I still have a bed. I only have 1 instead of 4. But otherwise, and we put in sofa beds in there as well, so that we can actually accommodate a few extra people. You learn a lot over time, and it's just making sure, like, I've made enough mistakes that I can prevent other people from making them now. That's where I think my skill and experience comes into play.
Yeah. Thanks very much for sharing all that. That was it was lots of amazing information, and I'm actually in shock. It just seems like now all different types of real estate investors are moving to the US. They're even pushing out Airbnbs, like arbitrage and stuff. So that was interesting to know that. It's just it's kind of shocking to see what's happening in Ontario as everyone's getting pushed out into the US. But thank you so much for coming on. It was great to hear all the information you were able to provide. I'm excited to see you next month for the networking event. There's going to be even more information you're going to be providing. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to the networking event coming up. I'll have a few sort of lessons learned to share with everyone and really go through sort of a deeper dive over what can be done with short-term rentals.
Awesome. Sounds good. And so if you love what Keith said, follow him. He will be tagged on this video. And if you love watching my shows, like it. And if you're on YouTube, come into my Facebook group so you can always be on top of what's going on there. And thank you everyone for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. And thank you, Keith, for coming on.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Keith.
Bye.